studio where you and I usually meet.
Yes.
Right? So, but I'll kind of fill everybody in on what we're doing.
All right. It is noon. Let's get started. Welcome, everyone. This is our December brown bag lecture, our research lecture. And I've been working with our very own Brooke Best on bringing a few artists into the brown bag repertoire, if you will. And today is one of those days. I think we're going to hear a lot of really neat, wonderful things from our speaker, Lesli Robertson. I wanted to introduce her briefly. Lesli is an interdisciplinary textile artist, designer, and project developer who partners with local and international organizations to develop impactful engagement through interactive programs. Her focus is to create visual and collaborative experiences that enable others to find new perspectives and value on a range of cultural and social topics. She specializes in artisan engagement, which I think we'll see a lot of today, working with diverse cultural groups to assist in new approaches to traditional textile design for contemporary viewers and markets. Her recent work through Fulbright, USAID, and Smithsonian funded projects has taken her to Ghana, Uganda, Armenia, and Kuwait to work one-on-one with artisans at the intersection of traditional and contemporary design. She develops and advises on training programs, designs country/technique specific curriculum, and works collaboratively with artisans to assist in product development. So, Lesli, I'm going to turn it over to you. And I would say, you probably all heard us chatting before getting ready for this. You're welcome to post questions in the chat. You're welcome to raise your hand. This is going to be somewhat informal in that.
Can you help me? Ow! God, I can't move around with my shoulder.
So
okay, I just had to mute Margaret. That's okay. So I lost my train of thought. Okay, you can put your questions in the chat section. Raise your hand. Lesli can answer your questions. And at the end, if you'll unmute your cameras, if that's a thing, like show, and so she can actually see all of us, and we can talk with her about what she's gone over. All right, Lesli, I will turn it over to you.
thank you, Erin. So I love to do these type of talks, but you are welcome if you want to keep yourself muted until maybe if you have a question, but if you want to turn your camera on, that means I actually get to talk to people and not just, if you've ever done one of these Zooms, you realize that you talk to a void and it's a bit more difficult. I love to give presentations and engage with people on things that I'm passionate about. And so, yeah, if I get to see you, it's all the better. So I'm really thankful. Erin and I just started, I guess Cheryl, hi Cheryl, a former student of mine, I feel old. She connected me to the program at Brit, and I was really excited to talk to Erin and look at ways that we can intersect around education, around plants, around indigenous fibers, which is something that I've really grown to love over the years working in different countries and working with different artisans who regularly use indigenous fibers, things from their surrounding to create beautiful, a lot of times generationally passed down and generationally old works of art and works of craft and works of function that carry such beautiful meaning and such beautiful ties to history and culture. So this has been great. Erin and I and Cheryl have had just some great conversations and looking at how we can start working together. So I will say that this is kind of the first of our interactions, which is great, this brown bag lecture, but we also have a workshop next weekend. If you'd like to join, we're going to be making these lovely, I'm going to put it on so you can see, these lovely naturally dyed masks. And it's going to be a really unique workshop that we've never done live, but we've actually created the content for it. And it's going to be called Self-Care, Plants, Textiles, and Therapy. It happens that my best friend is a trauma therapist and has been a trauma therapist for, I guess, 10 or 15 years. And so we're going to be doing a combination of making of natural dyeing with Osage orange, as well as a group therapy session, which teaches us how to learn to breathe, how to create grounding objects. And so I'm excited about doing a mask because I feel that we can actually be comforted by this instead of feeling like it's something that's going to smother us, knowing that we actually naturally dyed it, we had a control over it and caused the color to happen, and knowing that what we're putting on our body is 100% cotton and 100% natural. So anyway, that's going to be something that I guess Erin we have links we could probably send in the chat if you'd like to sign up. And
Yeah,
then
it's actually on the screen right there,
Oh,
down at the bottom left. There's a link.
Okay, perfect. And we'll be sending little kits, or you can pick them up at Brit, so that you'll have your mask, your Osage orange, and anything you need. And then if you want to learn how to breathe with us and learn how to ground with us, we're going to be doing that. And I think the other thing we're still in development, and we'll maybe talk a little bit more about it at the end, is a barkcloth workshop that has a lot of online content that we're going to try to do similar to this natural dye that gets actual barkcloth in your hand. So I don't want to tell you much more about that until I introduce you to barkcloth and get you really excited about a material that is super interesting and really, really special. Cheryl, I have a fun question. When were you my student, if that's okay to say? Because I'm curious if I started working in Uganda while I had you in class or while we were at UNT. No? So that must have been when I was still in graduate school.
You were in grad school and I was Amy's student.
Okay, perfect. Oh, you weren't a student of mine. I lose track now.
It was very close. You were working on the big digital loom when I was going through with Phyllis.
There we go. Okay, so shortly after that, I made my first trip to Uganda in 2005, and it was because I was studying weaving in graduate school and right at the end of getting my master's, and I had an opportunity to work with a nonprofit to work on floor looms that they had. So I went over in 2005 for about a month, really fell in love with Ugandan cultural arts, and found that there was very little published about the artworks from Uganda. Now that might not seem like that's basically not like it is today, because how many times have you seen Ugandan baskets, right? Or you can even Google that. It's just taken hold in the last 15 years. But when I was first going into Uganda, I dug and I could not find hardly anything about what types of specific fibers, techniques, processes, and objects were being made. And so I distinctly remember being in a little town called Wakiso, which is right outside of Kampala. And on the roadsides, I don't know if any of you have been fortunate enough to travel to Africa. It's a really beautiful continent and a wonderful place to be. You have your roads, but you have very separate small stalls that are set up alongside the road, and people have their small businesses in there. And so I remember I asked our host to pull over because I saw a textile. And of course, if you're a textile nerd, a self-professed lover of anything that's handmade, and you see something that you've never seen before, you get rather excited. So I just distinctly remember it was in 2005. We pulled up to this very small, it was probably like 8 foot by 8 foot. It was kind of clapboard with, out of wood, had a window in the front, and it had the stacks of this rust color fabric, right? So again, because I'm not in my studio, I can't show you a ton, but so imagine like this gorgeous color, big sheets of it just stacked up. And so, and of course it had other different types of objects and strings of nuts that were, strung as beads, a lot of different things. And I pulled over and I was like, what on earth is this? I've never seen anything. The color's amazing. What is this? And so finally I learned that it was barkcloth. And then it really hooked me in, and I became absolutely obsessed with this material, wanting to learn more. And then every step of the way, when I learned something more about it, it just became even more intriguing. And essentially at that time in 2005, and then when I went back in 2006, the only books and the only publications that I could find anything written about barkcloth was an interlibrary loan book that I had gotten through the UNT library that was about this big, published in the 1970s, that had barkcloth on the front of it. And then I think maybe 1 or 2 articles. There was nothing. And so it became sort of this mysterious material that I needed to learn more about. Subsequent years brought me back, whether through sponsorship of UNT or grants that I happened to get. And it was really wonderful from about 2005, 6, 7, 8, and 10, and then 18 and 19. I've had the fortune of having 7 trips back. Every time digging into culture, digging into barkcloth a bit more, and really learning more and more about the material. Because I've been there so long, I have gathered way too much information. And so to be able to try to plug it into I guess now it's a 50-minute talk or less, is really difficult. So there's going to be a lot that I'm realizing as I'm talking now that I haven't even told you. It's not even in my presentation, things that we've done. So, bear with me, because I wanted to take this opportunity and kind of introduce you to the material and break it down for you and how it has served Ugandan culture, Ugandan history, and how it's been a part of so many different elements that is not that typical of a textile, right? It's a part of environment, it's a part of history, it's a part of culture, it's a part of practice, cultural practices. So I'll kind of take you through that and give you a lot of probably more content than you ever thought you wanted to know. So I will quit being the talking head right now and actually put my presentation up to show you. And again, I would love, if you have questions, I do not mind being interrupted. So you can ask, if I don't see your hand raised, or Aaron, if you can kind of see, y'all can interrupt me. You can ask more questions, because I've studied this so much. I know it like the back of my hand. There are things that I might not realize that I need to tell you, or that you might be curious about. So I would love just to know as I go along, if there's anything that jumps out at you. So barkcloth of Uganda, another word for barkcloth is Lubugo. That is the Ugandan term for barkcloth. If you're not familiar with where Uganda is, it's right here. You can see in East Africa, Sub-Saharan Africa, specifically East Africa. It is south of Sudan. It is to the east of the Democratic Republic of the Congo, to the west of Kenya, and to the north of Tanzania. It is bordered by, has its border on Lake Victoria, which I think might be the second largest freshwater lake. And it also happens to be the source of the Nile River. And so that's really beautiful. In Uganda specifically, this one particular textile comes from an area in the west in 2 districts. One district is called Masaka, and the second district is called Rakai. I actually did name my cat Rakai because I thought it was such a beautiful name and beautiful term, and it helped me to remember my trips to Uganda. And you can see that circled in red are the districts and the main area of production of barkcloth. And again, what is barkcloth? I will definitely get into that with you. Barkcloth, like I said, there's so many different parts of it that make it a rich material, that make it something that is beyond just this really, great textile you hold. There's such a depth to it that I hope that through this presentation, I can give you a greater sense of. Because we were talking with the Botanical Research Institute, I felt this photo in particular, and you saw it as well for some of the promotion, was absolutely perfect to start off with. And it wasn't until my 7th trip, literally interacting, studying, seeing barkcloth, that I saw this. Barkcloth is a part of the Mutuba tree, and it's a part of the Ficus natalensis species or family. You can correct me, I would love that if I need. There's about 13 different species of this Mutuba tree. And this in particular, and this will make a bit more sense when I take you through the process video, but these are roots that are growing out from the cut that was made to harvest the bark from. And as many times as I've seen the process of making, I've seen them stripping trees, I've seen them making this, I had never seen this, and it was absolutely beautiful. Just to kind of keep in your mind for later, what happens is these roots, this is probably 6 feet up in the air. these roots, they will be trained to come down, to grow down and grow back into the ground. And they'll be used for the harvesting of bark for the king of the Uganda. We'll kind of show you a little bit more about him and talk a little bit more about barkcloth and its relationship to the cultural identity. But I love this. I think it's the most beautiful thing. And we were just, you do that. I can't believe it. It's absolutely stunning. Just to give you a little sense in context and to paint you a photo of what visually it looks like to see barkcloth in its element. Like I said earlier, driving by and seeing it in the shop, these are some images of it. Right here, you can see to the right that sheets of it are stacked up. This is a place in the Masaka district, in Masaka town, where they sell a lot of other different types of items that kind of have to do with ritual, that have to do maybe with traditional healers. And so you'll see barkcloth being sold alongside of jugs with 3 spouts on them, or strings of cowrie shells, or very small objects that are being used in different types of healing, worship, things like that. And then on the right, you can actually see a photo of Bernard Matovu, who I met in 2008, and who is a really amazing barkcloth maker in the northern part of the Masaka district. So this just gives you a kind of a glimpse into the materiality. And when I say materiality and what we're talking about is we're talking about the process. We're going to be talking about the material itself as something that's distinctly unique, that has a distinct texture and a feel and a touch to it. Okay, I'm going to see if these videos work. And you know what? Let me look at this real quick. I'm going to go ahead and skip through these. I'm going to go right back to them. And I'm going to show you, sorry guys, I'm going to show you in the video of barkcloth making, because I think it's going to give you the context for what we're talking about. This is about a 10-minute video, and I probably will over talk on it. But it's really worth looking at and kind of all of us slowing down and observing the process so that you can see how it's being stripped from the tree and made into this gorgeous material. Let me see if I can full screen it. Can you hear me if I over talk as well? Perfect. So this video was made in 2010 as a part of, let me turn that down just a little bit, as a part of an exhibition that I curated. And again, like I said at the beginning, there are a lot of things that I have worked on with barkcloth that aren't going to be included in this talk because there's just not enough time. So this was made for an exhibition I curated with
Leslie, we can't see the video. We see a still image.
Go ahead.
We can't see the video. We can see
You can't?
image,
Huh.
but the video is not playing.
Let's try this.
But we hear the video.
Interesting. Okay, let me pause that.
Okay.
Okay, let's try this again. Okay, here we go. Okay, here we go. That's a lovely part of this. Now, can you see it?
Yes, we see.
Okay, perfect. You have to get out of one share and get back in another. Okay, before I play, okay, can you see it says stripping the Mutuba tree?
Yes.
Okay, perfect.
We're good. Okay.
So this video, like I said, was made in 2010 as a part of the exhibition that I curated at University of North Texas. We had international group of artists represented, as well as curated the exhibition so that really highlighted not only objects being made out of barkcloth, but the process and the ties to history and culture. So what they're doing is they're taking the Mutuba tree, I've seen the process about 4 or 5 times in my travels there. They're taking a banana stalk that they have cut at a 45-degree angle, and they've made horizontal cuts at the top and the bottom, vertical cutout, And you can see that they just shoved underneath that layer of bark to release this. And also note this 18-inch wide layer of bark. Now you might think, shoot, they just killed the tree. No, they haven't. So what is really unique about this tree is that if you take care of it, if you plant a Mutuba tree by basically cutting off a stick, one of the limbs, and you put it in the ground, that is how you plant a Mutuba tree. That's how it, I'm sure it has other ways of naturally, growing, but you have barkcloth farmers that use barkcloth will be planting their own trees, and it's amazing. You just stick a stick in the ground and it grows. I'm not lying on this either. I don't understand how it works. And so in 5 years, it's going to be ready for its first harvest. And you saw them harvesting the bark. And if you take care of the tree, like you're doing by wrapping it in the banana fiber, then you're going to be able to harvest once a year, because it'll grow back within a year. You harvest it once a year, 40 to 60 years, which is amazing. So I have a piece of bark cloth that is 21 feet long. I had to cut it, unfortunately, this past week for a project, but it was 21 feet long. So you can imagine how old that tree was. And so as long as you don't have, significant damage from the sun, it grows back, and it's really amazing. So what he just did is he took that gray outer bark off. And so what's left is that really, that inner bark. So then it is the labor-intensive stages of pounding and taking this from being a bark to being a cloth. Because the material is so beautiful and the process is so beautiful, I always love seeing it being beaten with a mallet, because the mallet has grooves in it. It's from a tree called an Enzo, N-Z-O, and you can see how these beautiful lines, these diagonal lines, as they're hitting it like this, create a just gorgeous surface as you go along. I tried my hand at this. Traditionally, it's only men who are bark cloth makers, but I was allowed several times to sit, and I'm not including those photos or videos because it's a bit of a shame of how well I did not do. But this Enzo, this mallet in Samu, is really hard. It's very heavy. And so they're taking and using kind of their elbow, not their wrist, right? And just hammering, switching hands, not even missing a beat, and back and forth and back and forth. And depending on your skill as a maker, depending on the size of the ensamu, this mallet that you're using, you're going to end up spending 2 to 4 hours of pounding this bark to get it to the stage as a cloth. And again, I want you to kind of visually record in your mind how wide that was. So at this stage, he is folding it in half and still pounding it. What was great about this whole scene, and I wish I had a photo from behind, is that he was one of the younger bark cloth makers in training. And he had in front of him, so in front of the this bark cloth making shed, there were probably 10 or 15 elderly men passing judgment and talking about, I guess, about technique. And so he had basically an audience of his elders just watching him the whole time, myself there and the woman that was filming with me. So he had a lot that he had going for him. I also want you to look now, each stage, this bark cloth actually starts to grow wider. So if you can imagine, it was about 18 inches. It's getting a little bit wider, a bit more wide, a bit more wide. doubled its size by now, which is impressive in itself. And if we look at the structure of bark cloth, and again, I would love, to do more research. It starts out and it almost like it felt. So it crosses over itself, and that's how it kind of widens out. Now we're on the third stage. So you can see how wide that's gotten. Do you see how it's behaving more like a cloth? And then you can see that it holds moisture in it. The only time water was added was when it was boiled right at the beginning. And it's already gone through maybe an hour and a half of being pounded. And they're basically squeezing it out now. And they'll actually tug on it a little bit. So y'all kind of watch for that. And you're thinking, that's great. It's already doubled. It's not done yet. So pounds it again. I think labor intensive is the only way I can think of to describe this process. We've also discussed with colleagues if it's possible to create a tool or some kind of system for doing this without human labor, but it's not. Okay, did y'all just see him pull it? He can stretch it. So he's pulling it, stretching it out, and now it's probably 4 times its size. And then you can see that it's that really light manila color as it comes off of the tree. And then this is a whole field that they have behind their studio where they're able to use just, local rocks and dry it in the sun. And watch, he's stretching it. It's not tearing, it's not going to tear, but you can see that it's this supple cloth. Now watch, it's always just almost equate it to this spandex. Like when it's wet, the ability to pull it is really, really, really amazing. So they leave it in the sun. I think it must have to do with the tannins in it or some part of the way that the longer they leave it in the sun, the darker the color. So you can see, I'll show you when this is the different rust colors we have. So this is my reminder in the video of how far it's come. So it started about 18 inches. And I think if I would have measured it, that would have been smart. So it's almost maybe 6 to 8 feet wide now. It's pretty, something like I'd never seen. So imagine, not having an understanding of the process and seeing that for the first time in person. It was very, very special. This is a group, again, of bark cloth makers we were very thankful to work with and allowed us to film. So any questions right now on this process? Anything that you're curious about?
Leslie, I have a question. As I'm watching this, I'm wondering, what is the range of things that bark cloth is used for? Is it used for clothing? Is it used, what do they use this?
Mm-hmm. I'll kind of get into that because I'm going to show you kind of some of the ways it's been used. A lot. Anything that, we're actually making laptop bags now that are out of woven bark cloth. It's a lot. And it has almost a feeling of like a linen, like a very dense linen. And if it's done really, really well, it's beautiful and supple and it moves wonderfully. It has limitations, so it can't be washed because if it gets wet, it still wants to pull in or pull out. But there are a lot of colleagues of mine that are artists and designers that are doing things where they're adding treatments to it or combining it with other materials to allow them to use it. So again, I have a video later I'm going to show you of that.
I was curious, between the time that they harvest it from the tree and the time that they start beating on it to make it stretch out, if there's a longer time period between those two stages, does that have an effect on the quality of it? Is it need to like keep
needs
the
that
original sap
moisture.
in it, basically?
Yeah, it needs that moisture. I asked a bark cloth maker to basically take the bark off the tree and only pound the last half of it, because I wanted to have almost like a record of this, spreading out. And what happened at the top is it basically dries up, like pulls in, dries up, and gets very brittle. And then of course, once it's pounded, it stays flexible. It doesn't dry up. It doesn't crack. So you can kind of see this really, this isn't even the most fine bark cloth. It's really beautiful. So it's gorgeous, right? You can also see when they dry it in the sun, it has distinct tones and colors. Also, a colleague there, Fred Mutebi, can look at a piece of bark cloth and tell me which specific Mutuba tree it came from. So again, there's layers of research that need to happen that haven't yet, because of the uniqueness of the plant and the uniqueness of the process. Let me show you a couple slides, but great questions, because again, let me see. I'm looking at my time to make sure we have plenty of time for questions. I'm going to share my screen so I can get back onto, here we go. There we go. So these are images, and I would love for you guys to jump on. I'll try to put it in the chat at the end of this. We did a great talk with the U.S. Embassy in Kampala, hosted about 5 of us working in bark cloth. I was the only one from the U.S. The rest were Ugandan-based artists and designers. And so one of the unique parts of the Facebook Live talk we did was that Stephen Kamya, who is one of the bark cloth makers that I work with now, was able to Facebook live stream with the makers out in an area called Bukaminsimbi. And so you can see there are bark cloth makers basically spotted throughout those 2 districts, the Rakai and Masaka district. Each of them have a different way that they not a different way, but some have very formal bark cloth making studios, right, which are these open air structures. Some really do it in their backyards. And so this is a place that's called the Bukaminsimbi Organic Tree Farmers Association. And it's a place that's really been dedicated the last, I guess 7 years, to developing and training younger bark cloth makers so that the knowledge doesn't die away with the men that are mostly in their 60s, 70s, and 80s. And so you can see at this facility that they are making beautiful large sheets of bark cloth. You can even see the differences in tones with some of them. And you can also see, which I do want to show you as well, this black one right here. And again, this trip that I took in 2018 and 2019 brought out things that I had never researched and seen before. Because Fred Mutebi and his brother Stephen at this place called Bafta, this one again, have been really focusing on indigenous knowledge and making sure it's not lost. They were able, of course, to identify the species of Mutuba trees. They were able to identify ways that you can clay dye bark cloth. So I'm going to show you just a really quick video. I'm going to pull it up of them dyeing in clay. And to my knowledge, no one else has documented this, so it's really kind of exciting to be able to show you all something that you can't see anywhere else except on YouTube because I posted it there. So can y'all see this? Okay. So this is Paul, Paul's last name is escaping me right now. He is a 9th generation bark cloth maker, meaning if you, I don't know how many generations 9 works back. I'm sure it's at least 100, 200 years. So his ancestors, his direct family members have all been involved in bark cloth making for 9 generations, which is incredible. He's one of the main trainers at BAFTA. And he also has this really nuanced way of finding where these perfect clay pits are to bury the bark cloth. Starts out rust and he pulls it out and it is dyed with clay. We think it's, of course, iron reacting with the tannin in the cloth, and it's going to create this gorgeous. So you basically bury it for 2-3 days, let the soil and the clay work its magic, and then rinse it out.
It says in 3 days it has gotten enough black. That any other addition is where are you?
So that's, you just heard Fred Mutebi. He's a dear friend of mine that we've worked on a lot of projects together. The other thing that BOFTA does, so if any of you ever want to sponsor any organizations that do tree planting, that do a lot of good for their community, let me know, because Stephen and Fred are really focused on replanting indigenous species of trees, palm trees and Mutuba trees. And we did a very, very simple fundraiser maybe about a year ago, for them to plant about 70 trees. So that's always something that if you do have extra cash laying around, you can definitely get that over to them. I can help you with that. This was interesting. I didn't get the name of this, so don't kill me. I can't remember. It's something they called a pumpkin, but it suds up and they use it as a natural soap. And that's how they would wash the bark cloth. So when I travel, I am always the note taker, the photographer, the question asker, the director of where we go. And so I realized after the fact that I missed things that would be obvious for me to record, like what was that type of plant they just used. So I hope that you see this is, again, the layers of bark cloth that we're kind of dissecting now, which is absolutely really, really exciting. Any questions on the clay dye? Because I'm a little bit obsessed with it right now, honestly, as a maker, as an artist. So let me pull back over. So you can see again, that beautiful clay. You can see that this is again, BOFTA and their workshop. And again, like I said, you'll have makers in so many different ways, different homes, different areas of these districts, drying bark cloth in different places, but essentially it's the same. It's this really beautiful tree that's been harvested, that's been beaten, and that's been dried in the sun. The one thing you probably saw at the end of the video that I didn't describe was that that because it's imperfect process, maybe there was a nick on the tree over time, a branch may have come out and it creates a hole. What they end up doing, and these are my favorite parts of bark cloth, is that they actually hand stitch it back together with raffia. So this one I just happen to have, and some of these will be large patchworks. Some of these will just be a strip through. And again, it just, for me, that imperfection adds something that is absolutely stunning to the bark cloth itself. You can see her doing that there. And at the end of the video as well, you saw this image, which is one of the most beautiful pieces of bark cloth that I regret not purchasing. So I put it in there as a reminder to always buy the things when your gut says to grab it. So history and culture, this is something that is what makes bark cloth so unique. I mentioned before the area and the districts that it is prevalent in. It's also because of where it's at, that is where the Uganda people, which is I think the largest tribe in Uganda, that is kind of the region that they're from. And so they have a system of kind of a royal system where the Kabaka is the head of the tribe. And his name is Ronald Mutebi II. And he has no political power, but he has a lot of power within his group. In Kampala, you'll actually see the Kabaka's parliament, the parliament for the Uganda. It's a large building that that they hold meetings there. You will also see at a part of some of the parliament's proceedings, they're wearing bark cloth. So they're strapping it on, just like you see the Kabaka here as kind of the sash togo style, and they'll have it over their three-piece suits. And again, it's this cloth that represents the Uganda identity. So this was his coronation, I think, in the 90s. And if you can actually find, if you Google Kabaka coronation, you can find a video on YouTube and you can see the procession of people. You can see bark cloth being worn by a lot of people, and it's pretty impressive. Bark cloth also culturally has been used as a burial shroud. Oops, sorry, let me go ahead and put this up. It's something that you will see where they sell coffins A lot of times we'll see bark cloth because it's traditionally been used to wrap the dead in. I'll show you some photos later that it is actually an honorary cloth that is used to, when they have to bury a kabaka, that's used to layer the grave. Now there is actually a group that's been working in Uganda out of Denmark, have been really invested in bark cloth. And so they're actually creating a way of changing the burial system, or providing a different way of being buried in Denmark, right? Because they're bringing in bark cloth for people to be wrapped in. Really, really a unique way that is leaving one culture and going into another. But again, this is a
Leslie, there's a question that about how much bark cloth costs, and also that gray outer bark that they stripped off at the beginning. Is there a purpose for that? Do they use that for anything?
I think a lot of times Stephen and Fred have made sure nothing goes to waste. So they're either going to chop it up and use it maybe in the soil. A lot of things, if I can't remember right, they're using some things for animal fodder as well. Stephen has a pig farm that he's raising pigs as well. So I think a lot of whatever's happening in the farm, right? The Mutuba trees are being planted there, palm trees, but they're also doing a lot of farming initiatives to help community with food scarcity. So I think a lot of that is making sure that there's no waste. I'll have to ask, that's a really great question. And then bark cloth pricing. Anywhere from 30,000 Ugandan shillings to 65,000 Ugandan shillings. If you can do quick math in your head, if you divide that by 3,500, you can come up with anywhere from, what is that? I know it in my head, but I tend to, when I do my own work, I work in shillings. Does anyone have a quick calculator? Let me look.
About $18, $19 on the high side.
Yeah. So again, very labor intensive. And that is actually on the high side of what it traditionally costs. When I buy it, I make sure that I pay exactly what they want and then some, so that I can recognize the, the artistry and the effort that goes into it. You also have to be really careful too, that if you're going in and buying large quantities, you can't buy it for 3 times as much, because it actually jacks the price up for everybody else in the country that uses it. Artists that use it in Kampala, for people that are using it. So it is that hard balance of, I know worth-wise in the Western culture, what it should be worth and what it should be paid for. So it makes it always a bit difficult. And then I think that's why I find other ways to kind of support those that are working in these types of cultural arts. You find other ways to support and to encourage and to give back. The other thing that I wanted to show you, because this doesn't exist anymore, unfortunately, these are called the Kasubi tombs. And so they are actually a burial place for the kabaka. And unfortunately, I think in 2010, 11 or 12, they burned down. It was one of the largest thatch roof structures in East Africa. And it was absolutely beautiful. And you had a woman here, she has bark cloth you can see wrapped around her. She was one of the caretakers. And if you look inside, this was our guide, Stephen Waswa. You can see bark cloth behind him. You can see the traditional spears. You can also see when you walk in the door, these plaited mats all over the floor. They're plaited palm leaf. And then you can see that every one of the beams is wrapped in bark cloth. There's also a bark cloth curtain that is supposed to separate the world of the living from the world that has the spirit world. And so that's what's behind there. Bark cloth as well, is interestingly in the past has always been used, has been used as a bed sheet to cover, because it does prevent mosquitoes from biting you, and it's really good to prevent bugs from getting in. So it's been wrapped around some of these wooden poles for that reason. You can see
Leslie, there's another question. Before, I hate to interrupt you, but before
I don't mind at all.
Are there any, this relates to what we were talking about, the monetary side of things, commerce. Are there any efforts underway to help market bark cloth and support local communities?
There are in a lot of different ways. I have a small business that I'm trying to grow called Mikeka Designs, where I'm using that to find, new products for the interior and home goods market. It's a bark cloth research network that I'm a part of that I'll kind of tell you about later. trying to find ways to delve into doing more research for that. And, you know, I think it's one of those materials that hasn't reached its peak yet. And so I think it has a lot of room for, you know, new work being made with it. It's very popular. It's used a lot in Uganda itself, but hasn't reached a very large export market yet. That answers the question. Potentially. See, I told you there's so many things to talk about. This is actually a royal grave of the Kabaka. And so I've heard that, I think when the last Kabaka died, they buried him in 4,000 pieces of barkcloth, like were set over his grave, 4,000 pieces. So again, you can imagine how significant the cloth is, how significant, of course, the Kabaka is, the king of the Uganda. And so this was really unique to be able to see this behind the Kasubi tombs. This was, again, you know, I kind of alluded to it earlier. I had a friend, Joanne, visit a traditional healer for me because I was really curious, because when I first used barkcloth, a lot of, you know, some people were like, I'm not touching it because I've only seen people buried in it, or I'm not touching it because the traditional healer that's in a part of our community uses it for purposes that don't line up with my values or my faith. And so, you know, we ended up being able to, I wasn't there, but my friend was able to go and visit Senkazi Isa, who is an assistant to the traditional healer there. And you can see the different ways and the different parts of the different objects that they're using together. They'll take and have barkcloth wrapped around them. They'll use a curtain of barkcloth as a way of signifying to the community that they are a traditional healer, that you can come to them with problems, and then they can create ceremonies around which objects are collected together and used to bring about what it is that you're requesting. I don't know much more than that. I haven't really delved into its use in traditional healing or traditional medicine. But you can see a lot of barkcloth behind him, it being used to wrap these items, including dollar bills, cowrie shells, coffee beans, all that have significant meanings. I do think there might be umbilical cords in there as well. So there's a lot that is in this traditional healing world that are really interesting in how they use objects, and especially barkcloth. Again, these are things that I'm kind of bringing out of my archive that I don't usually talk about or show because I don't, it's fun to introduce these to you, but I do think that there, again, more research could be done on this to really learn about its use in culture. Identity, and again, you were asking about it being used for clothing. And so the last 10 or 15 years, it has become something where people as a Buganda, you want to be identified through barkcloth and wearing it. Contemporary fashion, vest, gomesi, which are these, you know, the dresses down at the bottom with these gorgeous sleeves on them. You know, Kwangila ceremonies, which are the, hopefully I said that right, which are kind of like the rehearsal dinner. You know, I have the UNT, the University of North Texas now has a dress, excuse me, in the fashion collection that was a Kwangila, I said that right, dress. That was made specifically because she's Uganda, and it's gorgeous, right? So there are ways that it's being used by contemporary designers, contemporary artists, and so I don't want this material to be seen as this very old school traditional material. You've got really innovative people doing great things with it. When I hosted in 2010, we did a traveling exhibition where I partnered with Fred, and we partnered with local artists from Uganda, as well as international artists, and kind of creating an exhibition around barkcloth, because we found that the makers making barkcloth would send it to the city or send it out to be used and never saw how it was being used by contemporary artists. So I could do a whole presentation just on that. But it was great because at the traveling exhibition that we did, a couple of people showed up in barkcloth that they made in these garments, in these kind of poncho-like shirts. So it was really wonderful to see. Okay, and this is a little bit more of a overview of this. It was not a gallery space, but it was outside in a kind of a tinted structure that we made. And you can see Mercedes steering wheel with barkcloth wrapped around it, a contemporary jacket out of Germany. And then you can see, you know, behind there some really wonderful work by Ugandan artisans, excuse me, not artisans, but artists. So I'm just kind of give you a little bit more glimpse of how it's used, not only for tourist products, which you can see really tons of it. I mean, look how many things are painted on barkcloth hats. This is Sarah Nachizanzi's work. She's an amazing woman who teaches at Makerere University, and she has her own business called Easy Afrique Designs, and she does screen printing and embroidery and absolutely gorgeous work. And so, but you can see that they're really serving the tourist market, and really beautiful, where they'll have gorgeous, just, you know, those textures, the types of shapes, colors, it all really blends in and really brings about, for me, kind of representation of Uganda. I really love that part of Sarah's work. It feels like it really, she's bringing all those beautiful visual parts of culture and putting them on these barkcloth pieces. This work is Sanaga Teja. He is an artist, really well-known artist in Uganda. He would do work where he would make these very much art to wear pieces, absolutely gorgeous. You can see paintings behind him in the background. This is one of the pieces on a young woman there. You can see the beaded necklace and these gorgeously dyed pieces of barkcloth that have made these things that are exceptional works of art to be worn. There's a detail. And so you can also see, if you look really close, where it was stitched together, but also using that stitch as a visual element, right? When the red hits the black, it makes a really beautiful composition to the garment. Now, this was a part of the exhibition 10 years ago, but a lot of the work is still relevant, still being explored by contemporary artists and designers. In the exhibition, I had anything from the Insamu, the mallets, in the same room as a prototype from Mercedes-Benz for a steering wheel cover. And so it was a really great way of looking at the many facets of barkcloth and how it has so much potential in contemporary design, and it's still tied to process and history and culture. This is a work, it's a really bad photo, but it's a work by Ivan Ukuzi, who is one of the more prolific Ugandan artists using barkcloth. He uses applique techniques. And in this series of work, he would use things that he would find on his walks on the ground, pick them up, and create compositions out of these found objects on the surface. Again, this is Sarah Nachizanzi's work. I think most of these pieces are in the UNT collection. If you go into, I think, the Vice Provost office, you might even see them hanging on the wall now, which is rather exciting. And then this is a contemporary approach to wall covering. So this is a company out of Belgium called Arte. And so they, again, took that small nod to stitching and really created these puzzle piece type of wall coverings that really are beautiful compositions. I'll go through a couple of these so we can still have about 5 or 6 minutes so you can just see really great interpretations of the cloth. So again, we saw it stripped from a tree, and now we're seeing it as these three-dimensional art objects. It's really exciting. Susana Duarte Pinto is not working in this way anymore, but she was actually combining it with wool to felt them together to create very wearable, durable garments. And then we had, different shoe designers out of Germany finding ways to use it. Now, there is a good company, good friends of mine out of Germany called Barktex, and they've been working with getting barkcloth to the European market for about 20 years. So they're kind of a really great supplier there. And they've worked with a lot of these artists. And so you can see just, again, dyeing techniques, surface design techniques on it, and really changing it from its original form. It's bringing some really new and innovative approaches to it. Now, I'm not going to have time to play this, but I'm going to stop sharing. I'm going to fast forward because I want to show you what a good friend of mine is doing now. So just, can y'all see her? Her name's Kirsten Scott. Can you see the screen? Let me see. Nope. Okay, here we go. So I'm going to just kind of play the video, but I'm going to fast forward it because she is a fashion designer out of London. She's a very conceptual fashion designer, and she's looking at barkcloth as a way of creating these really beautiful garments for your body. She has been working in Uganda for dozens of years as well. And let me show you kind of what she's been doing.
Thinking through making continues to evolve our conceptualization of fashion in ways that challenge the status quo. Shape making has been synergized with barkcloth specific challenges in relation to body form and movement requirements.
So this is
in turn
barkcloth.
has
So
prompted
she's
reflections
creating
on contemporary
muslins
definitions of beauty, the body,
and then using barkcloth
conformity
as a
that
way
have fed
to
back into our design
explore
process.
contemporary fashion.
As connections are made in the brain while the hand is engaged in sampling, dyeing, pattern cutting, toiling. What happens if there's extra volume here or there? What does it mean to our ideas of perfection? What beauty can be found in forms
All of
that
this is
must
barkcloth that
exaggerate
they've
humps,
manipulated.
stress points, and
Gorgeous work.
bumps to improve wear? Our neo-crafting techniques, including natural dye finishes, embroidery, appliques, they strengthen as well as decorate garments to promote physical and emotional durability and to provide therapeutic and antibacterial benefits. Our finishes are lustrous and compostable, promote human health and well-being, and improve the strength and water resistance of fabrics. In slow stitching, there's a meditative rhythm that brings calm to the soul and opens the mind to new possibilities. Using a zero waste approach, all scrap materials are reintegrated into the project using biotechnology to create biocomposites for trimmings, finishes, and creating new materials for accessories, or used to make a dye from the barkcloth itself. The propositional garments created demonstrate barkcloth's aesthetic and material potential and challenge the conventions of beauty, materiality, design, and the body. Thinking through making, a holistic design methodology for contemporary luxury fashion has been formulated, which promotes the well-being of Ugandan barkcloth makers, their community and local environment, as well as those that make and wear the garments, which ultimately will compost to become soil nutrients. In doing so,
So I'm going to pause her there. This is a great video to look at, but I think that you can see, we've seen so many different ways it's been used. Kirsten in particular, she's a part of the barkcloth research network. She's very connected to BOTFA, the farmers. So we're a very small group engaged with this material and all in support of finding ways that it can really start solving some of the problems that we're seeing now in fashion, some of the ways that it might not solve it, but it can bring a conversation that needs to happen from zero waste to compostable garments to things like that. So again, it is a unique material. And I just want to see if there's few minutes for questions. Let me see if there was anything else on my, I think I was just about, okay. I think I'll show you just a few things off of the work that I'm doing. I have kind of gone in as a textile designer and have created a bespoke textile line where I'm taking barkcloth from BOTFA and combining it with other indigenous fibers for wovens. So these are some of the work that we've done this year in collaboration with Rachel Elise. If you love this bag, you can buy it. It is wonderful and I use it all the time. You can see some of the work that we've collaborated together on this. And again, you can see the way that I've worked as a textile designer to transform that material into textile yardage that, I'm working with different collaborators to explore for different functions and use. It's a really wonderful, really wonderful material to explore because of the texture, the materiality of it, but also knowing the history and the connection to culture. That's what draws me into it. I'll end with this. This is a quote from Vinnie Nakazibwe. She is a lecturer at Makerere University. And she basically says, in every place around the world, there are lots of treasures that we have perhaps ignored. And there is need to revive aspects of the past in order to propel developments into the present and the future. She said this about 10 years ago, and I think it's just as relevant today. Identifying what exists, how we can move that forward in contemporary design, our contemporary world, and how it can, revive aspects, support and preserve treasures that exist, and, discover things that haven't been fully explored yet. And I think barkcloth is one of those. So I will end it there. I will show you one last photo. This is our part of our group of stakeholders, Kirsten, myself, we work from outside of Uganda, everybody else from Fred, who's standing next to me, to his brother Stephen, to Paul, to Vincent, to Kirsten, to Josephine, and I can't see who's behind because I've got my screen up. But you can see that it takes a whole team of people, of stakeholders that are really engaged in making sure this material stays preserved. So I thought I would leave a little bit extra room for question time, but I might have gone on and on. But are there any last questions? We might have like a minute or a couple minutes. It's a lot. I'm sorry, guys. I always tend to like do these presentations and realize I filled your head with a ton of information. But that's like that's about 10% of the stuff that goes on with barkcloth in the world. Maybe 5%. It's crazy.
You guys are welcome to unmute yourselves if you do have a question.
I am curious about possible avenues for marketing this material to support local communities. I've seen programs in Madagascar, where I've worked a lot, that combine conservation programs. So they work with local communities to help train sustainable sourcing of basket materials, and then help the community have capacity to upscale their, I guess, ability to make baskets. And then they partner with, in this case, it's a company called, it's a nonprofit called 10 by 3. And when you go to Whole Foods anywhere in the country, you might see baskets by this company, 10 by 3, and they're like $25. And what that $25 goes to is a very nice basket, but also it's paying 2.5 times fair trade price back to this community. And it's incentivizing a lot of important work, educational, community building, and conservation and sustainability.
I would love to, maybe email me, because I would love to pick your brain about that. It's funding, it's finding grants, because we literally have everybody needed to do something like this. One of the last puzzle pieces was really identifying markets, because you can create as many products as you want, but if you can't sell them and there's no market for them, then you're creating a whole, a whole thing that can just crumble because you're paying people to make things that you can't sell. I would love to know more about what you did in Madagascar and see if there's possibility of just learning a little bit more about that, because we're literally ready this year. I've talked to some of my partners, Fred and everybody, of doing that. They've gotten embassy grants before, the Ambassadors Fund, but nothing that has sustained them because it's always, again, export market or import, or local market that they need to develop. So
that makes sense. Yeah, I think this nonprofit in particular, I think their biggest market is Ghana, and then their second is Uganda. So I think there should already be, a pretty large maybe infrastructure through them. And I can send a link maybe and a contact for one of my colleagues who helped set that up, if you'd like.
Yeah, I would definitely love to know that. So I might, feel free to contact me, because I am a learner. So I came into this whole world out of higher education. And now I'm working with artisans, trying to do grants, and so anything that would be great to learn.
Cool. Yeah, no, I mean, when I see this, I want to go to the store and buy some barkcloth.
I know.
So, being able to help facilitate that, that's like the next, that seems like the next step I'd love to be able to help with.
Perfect. Well, I will reach out to
Great
you.
talk. Thank you. It's beautiful work. Really cool.
Oh, thank you.
Anybody else? Any more questions?
Oh yeah, Peter?
I have one. Thanks for the talk. That's really great. Botanically kind of related, I guess. It's a species of ficus, which is a fig. There are hundreds of species of figs, and most of them that I've ever seen or dealt with have this gooey, milky latex that can really get all over the place if you're cutting it. Does this have that?
A tiny bit of it. You'll see it leaking out a little bit when they make the cuts. I have barkcloth. Do you study plants?
I collect a lot of ficus in the Philippines. Yeah.
You want some barkcloth? Maybe I can you to
Peter, I have some barkcloth. I'll bring it over to you.
Oh, good.
All right.
Bring it over to you.
Okay.
No, it has a little bit of that, but nothing that gets into processing.
That's one of the beneficial aspects of this particular species, I guess. I can imagine some of these species, it would just be, you know, not able to work with this. So
Oh no, this is nothing that
interesting. All right. Thanks.
It's unique. Literally, Peter, it has not been studied enough. Whether, I don't know why, maybe it's not in front of the right person, but part of what Kirsten's doing with the barkcloth research network is she's got 2 colleagues at Manchester University in the UK that are really finding some really amazing things out about it in terms of antimicrobial properties it has. And so they're going to actually publish something on that in the next, hopefully, couple months. So I'm not supposed to say anything, but that's all I know. You can take that off the recording, right? No. It'll be fun.
I also was very curious, and this might be beyond the purview of this talk, but is this tree in good health? Are there a lot of them? And would it ever be endangered? Where else does it thrive?
It only thrives in that part of Western Uganda, a little bit in the Congo, a little bit in Tanzania. And Uganda has a problem with deforestation. It also has a problem with invasive species. They brought in eucalyptus in the 80s. And one of my colleagues, Pamela, who I work with in the Makeka design, she was like, that was my uncle, right? And, thinking that it would be a really great species to grow fast, to provide wood, but it basically drains the soil around it and is devastating a lot of the swamps that are in the local area. There's not a problem. The Mutuba tree grows so well that there's not a problem. There have been people in the past, I think Oliver and Mary out of Barktex maybe worked on a project that I can't remember if they did or someone else did, where they're trying to basically line them up and create like a whole crop of Mutuba trees, and it doesn't work that way. It needs to be within other species, including coffee plants and banana plants, whether that's because of the soil, whether that's because of the nutrients or the water or the shade it brings, but it likes to be free and a little bit independent and not so, regimented.
Not a monoculture.
Those are words I don't know, so.
Yeah, all one plant, almonds in California. Yeah.
No, not like that at all.
Wow. Well, Lesli, thank you so much. Anyone would like to connect with Lesli? It's leslirobertson.com?
Yeah. Yes.
And put this in the chat.
Y'all hunt me down on LinkedIn. And I want to try to record the chat too, because I'm sure there's lots of, because Tiana, something about a species of barkcloth. Okay, I'm going to have to just save this chat and look through it. I would love, I think that this is a place where all of your focus on plants and your focus on, it's a really great perspective to have on barkcloth. So as you're kind of thinking about maybe things that we talked about or I introduced to you, I'd love to hear your thoughts, things that you've seen that are similar, anything that you're curious about, because that's just going to help us as we're moving forward to make sure that we do what we can to support Fred and Stephen and all those on the ground trying to preserve the species and preserve the knowledge that we can. I don't know, we're just trying to be open for moving forward in different ways. Perfect.
Right. Well, thank you, Lesli. That was really informative and quite beautiful.
There's a lot. I mean, I didn't even show you half the stuff. The whole time I'm thinking, shoot, I should have put that photo in. Oh, I should have told him about this. Anyway, it could have its own book, and maybe that's what needs to happen next. Who knows?
That's the next project. All right, thank you everyone for coming, and stay tuned for our next brown bag. Stay tuned to our website.
Okay, bye.
Lesli, thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Bye, thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.